Uh, I'm a first-generation musician. Nobody in my family had ever been a professional musician. And I started playing the piano and gravitated toward the trumpet when my mother moved my brother and me to northern Alabama. I went to school at Florida State University as a trumpet major, applied music, and got also a music education degree. I had the great fortune to get a National Defense Education Act fellowship to go to George Peabody College in Nashville, Tennessee, where I studied trumpet with Adele Sawyer and had some wonderful teachers there, many mentors. I was on a PhD program, which was 3 or 4 years of everything paid and money, tax-free money given to me. And my first wife had a smaller fellowship like that. So I did what most graduate students do. I cast about to find a topic. And actually I had a topic, and the committee couldn't agree, which often happens. And then somebody told me, well, they can never, they'll always agree to a life and works. And I said, well, I don't know, I don't want to focus on some composer. And I thought, I wonder if there's been a history of electronic musical instruments in recent times. So it turns out I did the research and found out no. So I presented that topic. It was received gladly. And I was very glad to get the topic because I probably never would have finished my PhD had I not had that topic. I got so interested in it. And there were 2 librarians over at Vanderbilt University, which was across the street from George Peabody, who took great interest in my topic, Lois Greist and a Miss Bird song. There was also a man, Mr. McClellan, who did photographs for me, and I have 80 archivally mounted acid-free paper, large format photographs of electronic instruments. So out of that, of course, I did a good bit of research, and one of those forays to do research, I went to New York City, and specifically up to Trumansburg, New York, where the Moog factory was. Moog was a very hot item at that time. We're talking, my PhD came out, I think, in 70. So I was up there 1969 or 70 and met Bob Moog and interviewed him, and he put me on to Eric Sade and Wendy Carlos and Raymond Scott and a number of people that I interviewed subsequently. And when I graduated in early 70s, my first wife and I went to Europe, and I toured the electronic music studios there. I met Pierre Schaeffer, I met Mueller at the Northwest Deutsch Rundfunk, allegedly the first electronic music studio. And in general, I met Henri Pousseur. In other words, I went around. Even at that time, I was selling the idea of keeping the artifacts of electroacoustic music. I recognized early on, this is history in the making, and nobody seems to notice. So subsequently, a man named David Van Koevering, who was intimately tied up with the Moog Company, hired me, if you will, or met me. Bob Moog told him his exact words were, "You've got to go meet Tomm Ray. There's this sage in the middle of the country." And I turned out to be that sage. Well, the worst information I ever gave him was, this mini Moog, it's not going to amount to anything. Well, why not? Not enough modules, not enough interconnectivity. At that point, I did not realize much about pop music. I wasn't very interested. But anyhow, I took a very low-paying job in Florida to show synthesizers in the Pinellas County schools and to start writing and doing some things like that. Van Koevering then was pulled up to the Moog Company, and I did manage to write the Sonic 6 manual. I guess the new one. I guess they had something else but wanted something better. And I also wrote a little curriculum called Meet Moog and Make Music. and that was adopted by several physics professors and so forth. Inevitably, though, it seemed that I was pulled up to Buffalo at least part-time, and I lived in a hotel while I was working at the Moog Company. And that's when I met people like, well, of course, I saw Bob Moog again. I met David Luce, a number of the principal engineers of the Moog Company. And at that juncture, kind of started my career with the early Moog Company. On very short notice, I was given the task of, well, could you write a better Mini-Moog manual? I said, yeah, I've seen that one. I think I could write a better one, but I'll need an artist to help with it and so forth. And, well, we have an artist. His name was Bob Gadash. And subsequently, Bob and I probably produced half a dozen, 6 to 8 manuals for the Moog Company in short order. Micro-Moog, Multi-Moog, Prodigy, I guess, was one of the last ones. And I had a very checkered career with the Moog Company. I was fired twice and quit 3 times. So I figured, well, that's about as well as my parents have done. They were divorced from each other twice and married to each other 3 times. So I figured, well, I've been fired twice, but I quit 3 times, which I might add in my defense that there was no a reason other than political reasons why I was ever fired. But I learned a lot about corporate America, particularly when Norlin acquired Moog, or was in the torturous process of acquiring Moog, and that was another history. I must have worked for 6 to 8 marketing regimes, some of which knew what they were doing and some were complete idiots. You know, I'm sorry, but they just didn't know the music business. So that lasted over many, many years, of course. And over that time, I became trusted by Bob Moog, Dave Luce, and finally Jim Scott, who was with the company early. And then Dave Luce and I went out and recruited him again from National Cash Register out east of Buffalo area, somewhere I think in the Finger Lakes region, possibly. We drove by motor car and recruited Jim Scott, and Jim Scott and I became friends, and he called me his Herb Deutsch. Now that relationship, Robert A. Moog was stimulated by Herbert Deutsch to develop the Moog Modular, the Moog 900 series. Now some people are confused. Herb was not the co-inventor of the Moog synthesizer. He was the catalyst. If Herb hadn't been there, possibly there never would have been a Moog synthesizer. That's how important his role was. However, invention is a legal term that has to do with patents and so forth. At any rate, you see these things in the popular press and you wonder about them.